On time, you just made it. It is 6:30. Are we all here? Okay, let's see. I think we got it. 6:30. So we will call this September 28th, 2021 Clayton City Council and Planning Commission special meeting, our joint meeting to order. And we'll have our workshop coming up in just a little while, but we'll start with our roll call. Janet, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Councilmember Diaz.
Present.
Councilmember Tillman.
Here.
Councilmember Juan.
Here.
Vice Mayor Cloven.
I'm here.
Mayor Wolf.
Here.
Commissioner Altwall. I didn't
He is
see
not
that.
attending today.
Okay. Commissioner Cesarian.
Here.
Commissioner Gavidia.
Present.
Vice Chair Miller.
Present.
And Chair Denslow.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you very much, Janet. So everyone's here except for Commissioner Altwall. Frank is going to put his camera on, I hope, sometime during this. We are going to start with our meeting protocol video now, please.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order N-2920, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being webcast on the City of Clayton's website. The mayor will call upon its council, presenters, staff, and other speakers by name and ask that they speak clearly and state their name before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating via webcast and Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 and the mayor will call upon them at the appropriate time. Telephone attendees will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their name, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received by Clayton City Clerk by 5 p.m. today will be entered into the record, but will not be read out loud. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they are free to do so and should raise their hand and the mayor will call upon them at the appropriate time. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. The chat feature is not active. In order to get the full Zoom experience, please make sure your application is up to date.
Okay. Moving on to item number 3, which is the Pledge of Allegiance, led always, as always, by Councilmember Diaz.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jim. All right, moving on, item number 4, public comment on non-agenda items. If you would like to speak, you have up to 3 minutes. We'd appreciate you stating your name. And again, this is for non-agenda items today. Janet, do we have anyone in the queue?
Mayor Wolf, at this time, I do not have any hands raised on this item.
Okay, then we will close the public comment on non-agenda items and move forward with our workshop. Excited to turn this over to Raina now and get into this, into the meat of our situation. Item number 5, our workshop. So take it away.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council and planning commissioners. Welcome to our joint meeting this evening, which is a workshop kicking off our process to update the City of Clayton's housing element for the upcoming 6th RHNA cycle. So the order of events, if you will, this evening, I will be turning it over to our consultants from MIG, Ellie Fiore and Laura Stetson. They will make a presentation. Then, somewhat typical to how we do other items, we will ask the council and the commissioners if they have any questions for clarification or understanding. Then we will take public comment on the item, and then it will come back to the council and commission for discussion, deliberation, direction to the project team, etc. So that is the general order of events this evening. And unless there are any questions of me, I'm going to turn it over to Ellie and Laura to get us started.
So welcome, Ellie and Laura. Anybody have any questions for Raina? Doesn't look like it. Okay, take it away.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to share my screen here and walk us through a brief presentation. As Raina said, my name is Ellie Fiore. I'm the project manager with the consultant team led by MIG. My colleague Laura Stetson is the principal in charge, and she is here tonight. We're going to kind of split the presentation in half, so you get to hear from both of us, and then we'll have pause points, as Raina suggested, for your questions, turn it over to public comment, and then get back to some discussion from the council and commission. So importantly tonight, this is not a meeting with any action items. We're not looking for any recommendations. We're looking to make sure that everybody's on the same page, really to introduce the project officially to the public who are in attendance tonight, to make sure that everybody on the council and commission understands the process, the schedule, as well as their roles. In the housing element update and adoption, review our community engagement strategy and provide some preliminary direction to the team as well. So again, no action or decisions to be made tonight, just really launching the project. So with that, I'll do a brief overview of a housing element. I know I've spoken to many of you and you are all very well informed. So we'll keep this pretty streamlined. We did want to start with a bit of a dictionary here for the alphabet soup that's going to follow in the next several slides. So ABAG, you'll hear a bunch. That is the Association of Bay Area Governments, or the Regional Metropolitan Planning Organization for the 9-county Bay Area. And then these others will come in and out. And the RHNA at the bottom of the list here is the Regional Housing Need Allocation. So the housing element is part of the city's general plan. The city of Clayton's plan was most recently updated, I think about 5 years ago. And the housing element is the only part of the plan, or the only element of the plan, that is statutorily required to be updated on a certain schedule, and also to be certified by a state department, in this case, the Department of Housing and Community Development. And through a rather complex process, HCD works with the regional governments across the state and allocates a certain number of units at different income levels for which each jurisdiction must plan. So the state gives a chunk of numbers to ABAG. ABAG then allocates it to all the cities and unincorporated areas in the counties that it oversees. And then the cities and counties must create a plan for these units. That the gist of the housing element, it does not require that any housing is development. It is developed, excuse me. It just requires the city to demonstrate that its land use plans and zoning could accommodate X number of housing units at different incomes. So it does not require anybody, whether the city or a private or public developer, to actually construct housing. It's really a plan to make sure that that is possible. So what are the overarching goals of the housing element? And this is, again, at a regional and state level. And ABAG talks about, what's happened intra-regionally and looking at the different cities and the different roles that the different cities play, next to each other, essentially. So overarching, we're looking, as I'm sure everybody is aware from the news, there's a housing crisis in California, both in terms of supply, cost, in some instances, condition. So we're looking, to increase the overall supply of housing, in part to bring down the price point for that, and also increase the mix of housing types to accommodate different types of households to support affordability. Also looking to promote infill development and equity, so using our resources, including our land, efficiently and helping people access housing and housing options. Again, promoting the improved intra-regional jobs housing relationships. So obviously Clayton is not a community with a lot of jobs, it's a community with a lot of housing. And so looking at how the role that Clayton plays in that intra-regional jobs housing balance. And then balancing household income distributions. We want to make sure that there's a robust diversity of household types and residents in each community to the extent possible. And again, that there's appropriate housing for them. And then explicitly addressing past and present discriminatory practices that may have led to some segregation or inequality. It is also, an opportunity for the community to come together and have a conversation about how do we address housing challenges? Where are we now? How are we going to grow? How can we grow in a manner that, honors and respects the history of this place, the character of this place, but also, opens the doors to new residents who may want to come in over the next 10 years. And this includes strategies, as I said, to preserve the character, to protect open spaces. We're not looking to radically change anything in the city, but we do have a mandate to plan for a large number of housing units. So we're really launching a conversation about how we can best do that with the residents of Clayton. So the why, as I mentioned, it is a legal requirement of the general plan. It needs to be updated and approved by the state in order to avoid lots of penalties. And the state is getting stricter on these, and the stick, if you will, is getting bigger. So the penalties, if it is not adopted and certified, rather than every 8 years, you could be required to do a housing element every 4 years. You could be sued and be responsible for the legal fees as well as some financial penalties. And you could also lose local land use control if each CD does not certify your housing element. But on the positive side, again, we can, the housing element can help us adapt to new changes in the community, to new legislation, of which there's a lot. Laura will talk about that a little bit later. And having a certified housing element also qualifies you for housing and other grant funding from the state. So free money there. So in this, what we refer to as the 6th cycle, so this is the 6th time since I think it was 1969 that the housing element was introduced and required. So as I mentioned, a greater emphasis on social equity, responding to segregation and discrimination and inequalities across the Bay Area. Much higher RENA for all communities. And again, that's across the region, across the state. Clayton is not unique in having a bigger number this year. As I mentioned, more oversight by the department, both on the method of how, of the plan, of the housing element, of the allocations with ABAG, and also with more scrutiny from HCD on the actual elements itself. More factors to consider in allocating units to different places. New state laws, again, a handful of them at least, that are adding complexity, and stricter requirements for adequate sites. So we have to prove that the sites are not just adequate, but that they meet certain standards in which to make sure that it's actually feasible for housing to be built, even though it's not required. So as you know, the city did appeal its RENA number, and Raina and Laura attended a hearing on Friday, and that appeal was denied, which I think was generally anticipated by this group. And so we are moving forward with the RENA of 570 units. And this is our project plan, if you will, kind of chunked out in different phases. So you can see we're right here at the beginning of fall and holding a joint work session and really launching our public engagement process, which I'll talk about in more detail in a second. And then we'll go into, assessing the needs and the constraints and the sites in the city, and then get right into the goals, policies, and programs, which are the heart of the element, so that there's time in 2022 to go through the environmental review process and the adoption process, as well as check back in, of course, with the community. So highlighted here in these blue boxes are the interactions with the council and the commission. Coming up, we are working on an online map-based survey with target date, hopefully next Friday or shortly thereafter. We've had a lot of success with this tool in different communities. It allows people to leave very specific comments in very specific places, whether it's a parcel level or a neighborhood, and we can geotag that data to our GIS mapping software. And it also allows us to drill down on certain topics through some more traditional questions, some map-based questions, and some other interactive features. And people tend to like playing with that a lot. On October 14th, we'll have a Zoom workshop. It'll be our first sort of larger scale community workshop. We are talking to staff about the potential to do pop-up surveys at some events or public locations this fall. I know some of your typical community events have been canceled due to the pandemic. So we're going to look and see what makes sense there. And then, of course, the city will be publicly noticing all of these events, but they are and will be posted and promoted through social media, in the newspaper, and several other tools that you all have suggested to us, and that we know are kind of the easiest and best established ways to reach the most people in the city. In parallel, the city is running a project to look at what is the best use that is feasible and acceptable to the community for the city-owned property in downtown. This property was in the previous housing element identified as a opportunity sites, which means it has already been evaluated to some degree for housing. But we're kind of throwing the doors open to ideas from the community at this point, and then we'll kind of work through a process of figuring out, what has community support, what's feasible from a development perspective, what will really contribute to the character of downtown. And the first step in doing that is what we're calling a photo sourcing activity. So we're going to ask people as part of that first online survey to submit photos, whether it's a photo they took, something they found on Google Images, that they think is a cool use, a cool building, a cool, whatever that would fit well within downtown Clayton that they would like to see. And then that'll kind of populate the ideas that we'll evaluate going forward with this project. All right, I will pause there and turn it over to Laura.
Thank you, Ellie. Mr. Mayor, members of the council and the Planning Commission, thank you for inviting us in to talk to you this evening. I get to go into the details on what goes into a housing element and what it is we're going to be asking the community and you as we go through this process. The housing element has 6 components, or 5 main components, all of which feed into your housing plan. And your plan both identifies the sites that will support housing for the income groups, various income groups over the next 8 years, as well as the city's goals and policies and actions to take to put the housing element, move it forward. We'll be looking at what are the needs in the community, mostly drawing upon published data from the demographic trends, but also looking at what we've called special needs groups. These are all components required by the law. So we'll be needing to look at the particular needs of seniors, single female-headed households, the disabled population, and populations who have no housing today, the homeless. We will look to see what the city has accomplished over the past. We will examine constraints to housing development, both infrastructure, environmental, market, government, and certainly in Clayton, we'll be looking at the physical conditions in the community that constrain developments. That's all looking toward the crux of the element, and that's where can you put 570 units over the next 8 years. And actually, I do want to pause on that number for a minute. 570 is the draft RENA that's been assigned to Clayton. Through this appeals process that is currently ongoing with ABAG, if any community is successful in getting its appeal approved, any additional units that are pulled from that city or unincorporated area will be reassigned across the ABAG region. And so it's a number we're working with right now. It might go down a little bit, might go up a little bit, but that's what we're working from right now. The last part of the housing element is critically important, and this is an expanded analysis that needs to be done. And it's with regard to have there been patterns of past discrimination that have kept certain populations from purchasing a home or renting in Clayton? And if so, what are the actions that will be taken to help reverse those past practices? And this will be an analysis that will be pretty interesting. Next slide. And Ellie, if your internet starts to have problems again, let me know and I'll switch over and I can run the presentation. The needs assessment, as I mentioned, looks at special needs groups and other types of housing needs in the community. I always find this interesting because it helps reveal things about your community that you may not have known. And so for the data geeks in the crowd, this will be interesting reading for you. Next slide. We talked about affirmatively furthering fair housing. These are the things that we will be looking at as required by law. And in particular, what the state is looking for is actions that really move things forward. And it's not just with regard to providing housing, but is there a way to enhance mobility to make sure that people who don't have access to cars can benefit as well from the location and the types of housing that are in the community. How are we preserving any affordable housing that's in the community today and keeping people from being displaced due to new demands on the housing market? Next slide. The previous accomplishments requires a detailed examination of what worked, what didn't. So this is going to help us understand what's important to keep moving forward with in the community. The image that you see here is from your element that was prepared for the last cycle for 2007 to 2014 that examined how well the city had done, indicating whether or not a particular measure needed to be removed, kept in place, or modified. In this case, it was modified to move forward with housing opportunity sites. Next. The constraints, we've talked about all of the constraints that will need to be examined. The one that's a little bit tough to really have any actions to address are the non-governmental constraints. There's not much that Clayton can do about land costs or construction costs or financing availability, but those things do have to be identified in the housing element. Next. The sites inventory. As Ellie mentioned, this is a top-down process that starts with the Department of Housing and Community Development that looks at the growth needs for California over a period of time. Each region of California is on a different cycle for its housing element. Right now, those for the Southern California region, SCAG, the 6 county, most of Southern California is wrapping up its RENA cycle. The elements are actually due mid-October. So when the state's looking at the demand for housing, it's not this 8-year period just for the ABAG region, it's for a longer period of time for all of California. I don't remember the number that HCD has assessed for statewide, but of that number, 441,000 and change housing units have been assigned to the ABAG region. Just for contrast, the 6 county Southern California region has a RENA of 1.3 million housing units. So the ABAG region has a lower number, and through a very detailed methodology, the ABAG has assigned, as we've said, 570 units for Clayton, divided among 4 categories of income: low income, very low income, moderate, and above moderate. Next. The big part of the site assessment is to really look at what the constraints are and to see whether or not Clayton, given current land use policy, if there is capacity based on your general plan and your zoning to accommodate those 570 units. Are there adequate sites? I will tell you now that in our gut, and I think in your guts, the answer is no. And so part of this project involves not just updating the housing element, but may certainly involve some general plan amendments and some zone changes and changes to the zoning code perhaps, which is why a more extensive and expensive environmental process and environmental impact report will be required for this project, unless some magic occurs. I'm not sure what that might be. But ABAG has a tool where they've already done a preliminary assessment of sites that would be suitable in Clayton for new housing. These pre-screened sites indicate that there really aren't that many adequate sites in Clayton today for housing, but be that as it may, they've identified potential sites on all of the single family properties in the city and also properties downtown. They've indicated that there are certainly some constrained areas because of slopes, because of habitats. Everything that's really covered by your sensitive lands ordinance is recognized as a constrained site. I want to pause here just for a minute to talk about a new state law that you're probably all very aware of, SB 9, which says that a single family lot is no longer a single family lot. Under most circumstances, a second home could be put on a single family lot, and a lot has the potential to be split through a very simple process as well. At the time this site analysis was done, SB 9 was not in place, but I think ABAG is probably recognizing that single family sites, zone sites, are potential sites, knowing that you can put an accessory dwelling unit or some other second unit on a property starting in January when SB 9 goes into place. If there aren't adequate sites, a jurisdiction has the option of, at the same time, like Clayton plans to do, rezoning at the same time you're adopting the housing element, or you can promise to rezone within 3 years of adopting the element. The thinking behind this was, well, it's just probably better to get it all done at once. If you're looking for 570, let's just have that conversation with the community and get it all done. So that's the plan at this point in time. Next slide. The land use plan for Clayton today, anything that you see in green is open space. Anything in yellow or orange or brown are properties that are either developed with or planned for some type of residential development. And so you can see that, you know, again, you all know your city pretty well, that those are the rules that apply today in terms of land use development. Something important to note, and you can see on this map, the city limits, is that we are only dealing with properties within the city limits, part of incorporated Clayton today, nothing that is included within the city's sphere. Even though your general plan addresses properties in the sphere, the housing element requires that we stay within the corporate city limits, because that's all the city has actual control over at this point in time. Next. Not to harp too much on the constraints, but we've already done a pretty extensive mapping job, or the ABAG has, as well as not only do you have properties that are subject to landslides and due to slopes and soil conditions, but there are properties that are exposed to flooding as well and have flood constraints on them. There are properties that are protected parkland or that have been identified as sensitive habitat, important habitat, either because it's riparian habitat along a river or some other waterway, or because it's used by critters for migration and moving about the hills that surround the city and other areas and other communities. Next. So that's the constraints analysis. We're going to have a lot of work in front of us at working around those constraints to find housing sites. I mentioned that all of these analysis feeds into the housing plan, whereby the city establishes its goals and policies. It has a quantified objective for new construction. That's essentially your arena. That's the table 50 that's showing up at the lower right-hand corner here is from your prior housing element when the city had a arena of 141 units. And you can see in that first line in the table there how those were divided among different income categories. We will be seeing a similarly proportioned distribution for this arena cycle. And so the city will need to identify not just how new construction will be accommodated through land use policies, but the city's goal is to help with rehabilitation of units, and then also conserving units that may today be restricted to different income levels through covenants. Next slide. That's the overview. We can take this time right now to answer any specific questions that the council or commission may have before you open it up for public comment. So we will do our best to answer your questions. If we don't have the answer tonight, we will get back to Dana and to Rena, excuse me, and they will get the those answers over to you, and we haven't really discussed the best way to put those out there so that the public can be aware of all of the conversation that's going on. With that, Mayor Wolf, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you. Okay. And well, if you could stop sharing your screen, that'd be great. And bring it back to the council and commissioners. By the way, it's great to have our commissioners with us for the first time. Nice to get your perspective. And I see Peter has his hand up, so we'll go with Peter. You can do your question.
Hey, Laura and Ellie, I just have some just questions. How many housing elements have you guys assisted with as MEG?
Oh gosh, over 40 probably.
Yeah, in the
Perfect.
dozens.
Yeah, and that's awesome, because the next questions come from based on your experience with that, because I'm sure there's a public outreach portion of each of those housing elements. Based on your experience, what percentage of citizens actually participate in the process on average?
It's an it depends question. I'm going to start with one in which Ellie and I worked on together during the prior cycle in Cupertino. And Cupertino had an arena allocation of 1,064 units and wanted none of the public wanted to have nothing to do with that. And so we would have we had probably, gosh, Ellie, I don't know, 6 workshops maybe, where we would get upwards of 100 people at a workshop. Then I would turn to a city like one that I'm just wrapping up here in Southern California, Loma Linda, small community. And we have had 0 people show up at
Wow.
workshops. So it depends.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a gauge of what we should expect as representatives of the city as good participation in this process through your outreach and ours to get citizens involved in the process.
Yeah, there's no quick rule of thumb. We don't encourage, folks to think of it, as you said, as a percentage of the population, because it'll probably feel a little too small if you think of it that way. But our goal is to provide as many opportunities for as many people to participate in a convenient and quick way as possible. And we'll probably, in terms of numbers, get the most people using our online survey and other virtual tools, and fewer at the actual in-person and at this point Zoom workshops. But I would say for a community of almost 12,000 people, I think if we got 500 responses to the online survey, that would be good.
Awesome. And the next question is relative to your mapping technology, which you're going to be rolling out and introducing to the public. I'm wondering if your modeling reflects public's participation relative to their personal biases, i.e. where they live. So for instance, if I were living where I do and I don't want anything next door to me, would that be reflected as far as the metrics of your review?
We do ask people to show us where they live as a question in the mapping survey. We don't actually, I think we have the capacity. We don't typically drill down to that level of detail. What we use that for is making sure we've got a good representation across the city and across neighborhoods. So we wouldn't, imply any, as you said, kind of bias or perception based on where somebody lives. We're not going to be able to get to that level of granularity of, so-and-so didn't want this next to their neighbor. Our goal, again, is to get a big enough sample size that we have sort of a sense of the entire community and can see where there's consensus and where there's not, but we're not going to be able to get down to, so-and-so voted against their neighborhood.
And were there any other mapping technologies that might be available to us to help as far as the public participation, as far as, maybe SimCity-like possibilities? I know that that's something that has been discussed.
So I'll chime in briefly on that. And I have been in contact with ABAG and been talking about this. ABAG has now executed a contract with a company called Balancing Act that does has historically done sort of public budgeting, gamification simulations, and they have developed a housing simulation tool. I think Lafayette was one of the test cases for developing that, and we have applied for a free license for that. We should know within about a week, and if not, hopefully we'll find out what the overall cost is. But that's another type of mapping simulation to engage folks in just a slightly different way in helping show where potentially there's support for more housing.
Thanks, Raina. And I have one more last question that's top of mind. When we look at obviously SB 9 and ADUs, is it as simple as looking at, let's say, lots that are 10,000 square feet or greater, and assuming a certain percentage, say 10% of those lots might put an additional unit on their property? And is that as simple as that as far as coming up like with a chunk of our numbers, or is it much more complex than that?
It's a fairly simple process, actually, and I'm not sure yet where ABAG is headed with regard to allowing accessory dwelling units, ADUs, to be counted for housing. I keep falling back to the recent SCAG experience, and there was a formula that SCAG came up with that allowed jurisdictions to look at the trends in the community and then use that trend and assign ADUs to the different income categories based on a stock number that SCAG produced. I'm assuming that ABAG is going to do something similar, that we will, and certainly because, you know, you don't want to look back too many years for the trends for ADUs, because when what we've seen in most communities, when the ADU laws really made it hard not to deny an ADU, or on the plus side, it made it easier to build ADUs, the numbers started to do this. So we'll probably look at trends over the last 3 years or so to see how many units per year were built or have been built, or permits have been pulled, and use that number to project forward for the next 8 years, how many ADUs could be accounted for as part of the inventory.
And if I could just add to that, the ABAG, some of their technical webinars early on in the process did talk about ADUs, and it's possible not only to just go back a few years and say, okay, if we got 5 a year and then 5 times 8 is 40 or whatever that was going to be, it is possible to go, in fact, slightly beyond that, but there has to be a rationale for it. And one of the things that we know that we have on tap and that I've talked to Dana about is our SB2 grant and updating our ADU either ordinance or plans, et cetera. And so we'll need to be very intentional about how we treat ADUs. If we simply go by what our history has been over the last 3 years, we've been at about 2 a year. So that's not going to help us at all, really. And we're going to need to be a little more thoughtful and creative about how we approach the issue of ADUs and how they're going to fit in. So ABAG was like, well, don't get too crazy, but you know, if you've got a reason and a strategy and a plan, then you know you can move forward with that. So we'll see what they say as we go along through the process. But that was their advice, you know, 3-4 months ago.
And nobody has any guidance on SB 9 at this point, other than a report that was prepared by the Turner Center, a think tank at Berkeley, that has some suggestions or some analysis on what SB 9 could actually yield in terms of housing production. And it's not as much as people think it might be. There's not going to be a crazy land rush to start building second units or building 2 units on a single family lot.
That's all my questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the commissioners or council have any more questions before we open public comment? Yes, Terry? Or are you just unmuting? Oh, you're just blurring your screen, Terry. That's it.
No, I wasn't. I was unmuting to ask questions.
Okay. You have a question?
I do. I have a few questions. I have some clarification questions. First, Rena, you mentioned the ABAG software. Would that be something that would be accessible for the public or just for the staff and or council?
100% it's aimed at the public. It is a community engagement tool.
Okay. And then some clarifications from the presentation, or actually before I ask those clarifying questions, just as a point of order, Mayor Wolf, we've gone over the overview part of the presentation. The community engagement part of the presentation and comments around that will happen after public comments. Is that right?
We're going
The
to
community engagement plan that's part of the agenda.
no.
There is no further presentation. There was a slide that talked through that. If there are specific questions for clarification regarding the community engagement plan, I would ask those or discussion about it after public comment.
Okay. All right. And then a couple of questions about the presentation. Laura, you had touched on the section around previous accomplishments and progress toward the previous accomplishments. Why is that important in this process?
The key reason is to really figure out what's working and what's not. What did you promise to do during the last cycle, the 2007 cycle to today, or actually no, it was 2014. Sorry, and what wasn't working, what needs to be fixed. It's a requirement of housing element law that be done, but it's a good reflection thing to do as well.
Okay. And then also you touched on the AFFH section and how this is considered kind of a critical and maybe a little bit of a newer section for the housing element. And I think I heard you mention that. Has there been patterns of past discrimination and how to rectify that? How is that assessed?
There is a series of analytical maps that we'll do based on data available from the census going back in time, just to see where there may, and Clayton's probably not the best example to be using just because of the makeup of the community, but are there over concentrations of certain minority populations or low-income households? And do those seem to be concentrated in areas of the city and not dispersed around the city? That's the basis of the analysis. Also, we're looking at whether or not there are populations that are exposed to environmental hazards, health hazards, pollution. So it's not just discrimination, but it's have lower income people or people of color been concentrated in areas that are exposed to greater pollution hazards than other areas of the community. Again, I'm not saying that this is going to be a big deal in Clayton like it might be in Los Angeles or Pasadena, where I am, or Richmond in the Bay Area. And so there'll be a series of very informative maps. Excuse me. The key purpose of doing that is to make sure that the housing sites that are chosen would not perpetuate any conditions that are adverse to people today or in the future.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. And then the last question I had, the site assessment map that had the different colors, the green, yellow, and red. Did you say that assessment was done by ABAG?
Yes.
Where the potential sites, okay, so ABAG is the one that identified those yellow sites as potential sites.
Yeah, and Ellie, I don't know if you've dug down at all into it's called a HES tool. I don't remember exactly what it stands for, but do they have descriptions on that website that explain the factors that went into that?
Some extent, it is It's an initial screening. As we said, we're sort of still kind of learning the system and its limitations. We will be doing our own GIS analysis and mapping because that gives us a lot more flexibility. But what ABAG has done is sort of that initial screen that we looked at, green, yellow, red. And then for the yellows, it presents suggestions of how to start evaluating and filtering those sites to identify those that are most appropriate for the housing element. So it's a lot of the background work, and I think will help us focus pretty quickly on the areas of change.
Okay, that's all my clarifying questions. I'll have more comments on the community engagement plan once we get to that section. Thank you, Mayor Wolf.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie and Laura.
And any other questions, Jeff?
Am I misinterpreting the agenda? Is there a separate section?
No,
when I look at the agenda, I don't see any other section. This is the only discussion item.
no, there isn't. We just come back after the public comment for more discussion, but that's it.
Okay, great. Do we have a breakdown of the 570 units by income band? Is that in the slides anywhere? I mean, I missed it.
It is not. We did not provide on the slides, but we can look that up real fast and let you know.
Actually, I have it here if you want me to share my screen quickly. Is that okay?
Sure.
Go nuts.
So here's Clayton in the first column.
All right, so. All right, cool. Kind of continuing along the same question, that site assessment, what level of detail are we able to get from how it was derived or how it was assessed?
As Ellie indicated, our plan is to do our own independent assessment. We think we've got access to much better data than ABAG does when they were dealing with the entire ABAG region. So we will be doing independent assessment.
Okay. So are we not relying or utilizing that information in any way?
We're using it sort of as the maps you just saw came from there. So sort of the, first pass, kind of quick and dirty mapping. But when we get into individual sites, and it does, behind those maps, there are data tables and that show, identify which kind of constraints are relevant to each parcel. So yes, we do have that information. It's just easier for us to manipulate in our own GIS system. So it provides, kind of a really great baseline for us to start, but we'll have more flexibility and we'll drill into greater detail using our own GIS maps. Because right now it doesn't give you shape files.
So I guess just to clarify, are we utilizing that in any way, or is it just the only use is for the purpose of that image in the deck? Like, is it going to be used later on, or are you going to essentially, when you do your own assessment, are you going to disregard the rest of that data and set it aside?
No, I would say it's our starting point. Again, because it identifies which constraints apply to which neighborhoods, which parcels. And then again, recommends basically by parcel, kind of what steps to go through to analyze and filter the site. Okay.
Well, if we are going to use it for anything, like you just said, as a starting point, then can you make available the detail that is behind that assessment? Like you said, there's property level detail that's probably used to do that initial site assessment. Is that available to us?
I'm not sure that we have that available. The HES tool is, it's all based on parcel data. I don't know that we have a good way to communicate that data in any fashion other than at that map level. So I guess it's a question of what you're trying to get at, and we may be able to provide what you're looking for through another mechanism rather than relying on that HES tool. HES stands for Housing Element Site Selection, and it's really intended to be a tool if the city wants to use it. What was really valuable for us is, ABAG went through and did this kind of preliminary assessment across all the jurisdictions. And what you can see in that very first cut for Clayton is we have our work cut out for us because we have things that are either built out or they tend to be sensitive and environmentally constrained. What we heard from the ABAG Administrative Committee, not just in Clayton's appeal last Friday, but in every single appeal pretty much that went before the committee that day, is that ABAG cannot, in their assessment, take into account environmental constraints in assigning numbers of units to jurisdictions. So they can't take into account current zoning, which we get, or other land use constraints, including environmental constraints. And so in the realm of these competing objectives, it's really just, well, then you just have to put the housing somewhere else if you have an entire, quarter of the city that is subject to slides. Either you have to figure out how to reinforce it, or you have to put your housing somewhere else. So that HES tool gives us that really, really vivid initial picture, but it is a simplification. And I think we'll get far greater detail as we go through and literally look at every parcel in the city.
Yeah, I understand that, but that wasn't really my question. My question, if we're going to be utilizing this in any way, then what I'm asking for is to be made available the underlying raw data that is used to generate that top level mapping information. Is that available to us?
Let us take a look at what MIG is going to do and what that data is going to be, because that may be the easier thing, is whatever we use for our final analysis, we can probably better define what that data is rather than trying to figure out how to extract the HES tool data. So whatever we use for decision making, we should have data available for.
I mean, that is why I asked the initial question, if we're going to use it or if we're going to set it aside. Because if we're going to set it aside, then we can set it aside and it's fine. Then we don't need to even spend any time on it. But as Ellie mentioned, that's the starting point for our own, for the work that will continue thereafter. And if it is that, then you need to have a good starting point. And if you're going to utilize it, then I'd want to look at it to in the interest of information, to make sure that it's not, crazy. So I ask again, is what can we do to make available the raw data?
And we'll need to get back to you on that, because I can't tell you right now without going back into the HES tool and looking at it to tell you what that data is going to look like. But I also know that MIG's going to analyze all that data that's in the HES tool. But let me look at the HES tool, because I haven't looked at it in a bit, and see what it says about the access to the underlying data and how easy, how easy it is to get to.
Okay. Yeah. And I only ask because we're presenting it as something that we're going to be using. So if we're going to commit to not using it, then we can disregard it. But if we're going to use it, then it'd be good to know. So then just kind of continuing on, I think Laura, you had mentioned that there was a determination made that it's better to rezone now versus the alternate pathway to promise to rezone later. Was that you that mentioned that in your presentation?
Yes, I did mention that. That's the way things are structured right now.
How was that determination made?
It was made in discussions with city staff when we were talking about the best way to approach the program.
Okay. Because I think, isn't that a policy question?
I would ask staff that question.
Well, I mean, it seems like that's a matter of public policy, what strategic approach we want to take on the timing of the rezoning. Am I correct?
Can I maybe jump in on this one, Raina? Is that okay? I think to the point of efficiency, a general plan amendment, in this case, a housing element amendment, is subject to CEQA. A zoning amendment is also subject to CEQA. To the extent that those two processes can be merged together, you can streamline the CEQA process with one analysis instead of with two. And so I think that's the efficiency that we were trying to express. There's a procedural process, a streamlined process that we can use in terms of environmental. We can also capture a streamlined process in terms of how we engage the public in one set of meetings versus two. Public hearings can be streamlined, so we can consider general plan amendments and zoning amendments at one time. So there's some efficiencies in terms of process as well as staff time.
Okay, I think that makes sense. But I still think it's a matter of public policy, like how we would want to execute, right? Because doesn't that necessarily mean that we're accelerating any rezoning that we would otherwise not need to do in a given time frame?
One thing that I would like to point out is that there is a new law that just became effective or will become effective January 1 that actually could reduce the time for rezoning from 3 years to 1 year under certain circumstances. So for purposes of efficiency, keeping things streamlined and also ensuring that you can get the zoning done in a timely manner per the law, it just makes a lot of sense to do it all at the same time. Because if, for example, Clayton were to become subject to this, now you have to do it within 1 year. That's going to be hard to do if you have to do an environmental impact report in the future for the rezoning.
When you couch that in terms of conditional, what's the condition?
The key condition is that, this is getting kind of housing element geeky, I apologize, is that if, let me get this straight, I'm trying to remember because there are 35 new housing bills that have been signed by the governor, effective in January. If the city is not able to get a certified housing element, meaning getting HC to buy off on the housing element, not within this grace period that occurs after the January due date. It's due January 2023. There's a 120-day grace period. If you can't get HCD to buy off on it during that period, you have to rezone within 1 year. The way our schedule is working right now, that's not the plan. We've got everything planned to get everything done on time. But if there's a snag and things get delayed, you could fall into that category of having to rezone within 1 year rather than 3.
Okay. Do we think that's an unlikely outcome at this point?
That's not the plan at this point. The plan is to stay on schedule.
Okay, so I guess that brings me back to my initial question along these lines about the delay versus the do it now versus delay. Like, that's a choice we get to make, right?
It is, although 3 years is still less than the 8 years, and we have to have the capacity to meet not the reality of the 570, but the capacity to meet the 570. And so regardless of what sort of development occurs or doesn't occur, we will be required within a 3-year period at most to meet that 570 and to zone to meet that 570. So
no, I understand that. I think the point of my question is not necessarily that we should do one thing or another, but it's that is a decision point that I don't think that we should make the assumption that that's the decision that we would make. Whether or not I'm not saying we should do A or B, but I just want to emphasize the point that I think that is a matter of public policy that we should make a decision on consciously, because that's the first I heard that we would take that path. It's a matter of procedure rather than an outcome. So that's the point I'm making. Hopefully that's clear.
Yeah, it would seem that both paths are available to us. Obviously we're all in an information gathering mode at the moment, and I think that the more information that comes about, that will assist you guys in making a policy determination of what's best fiscally or politically or whatever, whatever's going to be best for the city. It's still within you guys' hands, obviously, to make that call.
Okay, great. Just a couple more questions here. I think you had mentioned, Laura, about ADUs and the method of calculation. I I'm not sure if I interpreted what you said correctly, but I think you mentioned that, you know, SCAG had used a methodology, but is it, isn't it the case that the formula, that there are safe harbor provisions within HCD guidance that allows the use of ADUs to satisfy zoning requirements? I think there's two pathways, if I recall. One is what Raina had mentioned about historical use patterns within the jurisdiction, but then there's also another safe harbor where you can take a history of the trend by region, and that also allows you to attribute a certain number of future ADUs in your plan. I think I read that from HCD itself. Did I read that incorrectly?
Well, there's actually two considerations with regard to the accessory dwelling units. One is the actual number that you can count towards your RENA, and Raina indicated that it's based on past trends. That's pretty much what our experience has been when we've been going through housing element reviews for the SCAG region, is HCD has been pretty firm in saying you can only use what the past trends have been.
No, yeah, what I'm saying is HCD themselves issued guidance on how you can use ADUs, and past trends being the methodology.
Right.
But I mean, I don't think that's a SCAG method. I think that's a California HCD method, right?
Well, both, but the other part I think that's important is not just the number of ADUs, but how those are distributed among the four income categories. And
yes.
And so that is, SCAG came up with a methodology for all regions, for all cities to use throughout SCAG, cities and counties, that said, and I'm just going to use some numbers, if you, that you can assign 33% to very low income and 33% to low income. What am I up to? 66, 22 to above moderate, and 22 to moderate. Here's how you can distribute it. This is the regional assumption that we've made. And HCD bought off on that and said that's a reasonable assumption. So most communities are using that distribution formula for their ADUs by the income categories.
Okay, thank you. That's good. And then, like, as far as I know, it's been a little while since I read, but the assumption of income levels at certain densities, I think that there's also some guidance around zoning at a certain density. You can make the presumption that it would sit at a certain income level to satisfy those. Do you have information on that?
You're absolutely correct. There's something in the law that people call the default density. And I'm trying to remember the exact cutoffs, but Clayton is a small community. Yeah, your default density would be 20 units per acre. For larger communities, it's 30 units per acre. So if there's a site
well, that's at you're saying the acre, but you're not saying the income band. So the default, if 20 is the default, what income band is that default at that density?
It's assumed to be affordable to very low and low income housing.
Well, wait, those are two different ones.
Both. You can group them together.
So a 20 units per acre qualifies as your very low income?
And low income.
Okay, so you could use it's a dealer's choice on that one.
Mm-hmm. And usually we distribute it among both to get to the number.
Okay. So then what would correspond to moderate?
We don't use density to look at that.
How would we categorize our zoning to satisfy the potentially 84 units for moderate income?
I think to some degree, we're probably going to use accessory dwelling units for the moderate income category. We haven't done the analysis yet, so I don't have a complete, I can't provide an answer for you in that regard.
Okay, let me rephrase the question. How did we satisfy the 84 or the previous cycle's moderate income zoning requirement? What was the formula that was used for that methodology?
We'll have to go back and dig into the current element to provide that answer for you.
Okay. I mean, I get, and the reason why I'm asking, because I know that it's not just the number of units, it's specifically units at a certain income level. And so if we're, if the goal is to satisfy the requirement to be in compliance, then it's important to know the rules.
Mhm.
And I think I take your point that 20 units per acre is the default for low, but there's no default for the other. I assume above moderate is just market, right? Whatever
Correct.
market rate is, no requirement. So moderate seems to be the category that we don't know at this point, the default. And then I guess my other question is, if that is the default, what are other ways that the income band can be satisfied without the density? Are there any other than the default? Like, is there a burden, a presumption to overcome?
What we need to do is to look at what homes have been selling for and renting for, and whether or not that falls within the moderate income range. We need to do the analysis on it. We haven't done that analysis yet to figure out how to distribute to the other two income categories. But we just know that we have this default density that we can use.
Yeah, I get that. But I mean, when you're talking about sales, I mean, that's like current state versus zoning for future state. So I'm asking specifically about the low income and very low income. My question is, are there other ways to achieve zoning in those income bands that do not meet the density requirement? That is a default presumption. So how do you meet the is there a way to meet the requirement not utilizing the default presumption?
It would have to be based on past projects, proposed projects.
Well, is there, I mean, I guess, is there ways in the law? Like, is there a history of doing this? How has anyone done this? I mean, I understand that you're taking a pragmatic view, saying, well, this is kind of how you'd make the argument. But I guess I'm not looking for the argument. I'm looking like, is there something that's been done that would meet that requirement anywhere?
I'll just we haven't used another method during this housing element cycle, but when I've worked on prior housing element cycles, we have shown that densities that are lower than the default density are actually capable of producing affordable housing in particular jurisdictions. So we've done the analysis to show that, let's say, in a community that had a 30 unit per acre default density, that actually affordable units have been built at 24 units per acre. So moving forward, we can make the assumption that, or the presumption that that would be the case as well. But we're in such a different environment today than we were 8 years ago, that really the default density is almost a saving grace, if you will, to be able to identify sites for lower income housing.
Yeah, I understand. That was, and I appreciate that. I think it's a challenge. And so that's my question is along the lines of, what are there any other mechanisms to meet that challenge that don't rely on the default?
Yeah.
And so that'd be something that I would, look to your experience to see if that has been the case. So, okay. Let's see here. And overall, I guess, are we I'm not sure how many times we're meeting on this, but this is going to be a long process, I'm assuming. So do we have guiding principles on what we're actually trying to accomplish? I think that, when we look at the slides, I'm trying to find the number here. When we look at, sorry, some of your slides have numbers and some of them don't. So it's interesting. Let's see. When I look at, slide, I have to extrapolate here. Slide 8, the one with the 6 orange boxes. These look like, both goals and rationale. But then when I look at slide 6, it's like a mix. So I guess my question is, do we have a concise narrative around what goals we're trying to accomplish with the element? I mean, the number one goal being compliance with the law. And then are there others? Are we going to establish those in any way? Because I think when we have a lot of decisions to be made over a series of time, it's helpful to have guiding principles that you can refer back to say, and it helps to say like, we've already decided this and it fits under these goals. And if it doesn't, then that decision can be made ahead of time. So I don't know if that's something that we're intending to do with this process.
We hadn't discussed it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, for example, we could say like, one of our goals is to, well, compliance with law, but it could be to have the maximum amount of unit zone that we could, possibly accommodate, regardless of the RENA number. We just want to go nuts and we want to say like, hey, bring it all on, let's zone for, 5,000. That could be a goal, right? Or it could be, we want to be in compliance with the law, but we want to zone for as little as possible to be in compliance with the law. Like those are kinds of things that I think help shape the decision-making as we go forward. And something that if we can agree, makes future decision-making easier. So I would suggest that having these guiding principles would be a useful tool. That wasn't a question, but a suggestion. So, all right, that's all I got.
Thank you, Ed. I saw you had your hand up on the screen. It's gone now. Do you want to still ask a question? Or?
Honestly, I'll be honest, Rena beat me to making the observation early on when Councilman Juan was talking about the site selection tool. And I was just going to caution strongly, having watched the appeal process and read the denial, that they made it quite clear, if you've got fire endangered areas, if you've got floodplains, if you've got slopes, that's not a rationale for, saying we don't have developable lands. They basically said, if you're stuck with those things, you either need to mitigate those hazards, or if you're unable to mitigate those hazards, then increase density on infill. So, I mean, they were quite clear on it, and I was happy to see Rena popped right on that. So thank you. And that was not to just her. I watched the Pleasanton, the San Ramon, really enjoyed the San Ramon guy. But anyway, they were all very vocal about not putting that there was a disproportionate number of things being put in the East Bay and not where the jobs are being created, which has been the gavel I've been banging for years on CCTA and even on the commission. Thanks for the time there.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, Councilmember Diaz.
Thank you. Very quick question. I appreciate all the comprehensiveness and detail in this massive report that we received, but I have a fundamental question. I noticed that the data is based upon 2000 and 2010 data from the census and other sources. When is it going to get updated, or are we going to be presented with more current information? My goodness, it's 2021. So a lot of this data is well over 11 years old.
We don't have city level census data yet. And as soon as we get it, it'll get flowed through the system. But until we can get that data, we can't incorporate it. And ABAG isn't going to care about any changes in population or other differential impacts across jurisdictions. They're not going to care. It is not going to make.
Who are you talking about?
ABAG doesn't care about anything. They only care about getting a number. They don't care about the environment. They don't care about landslide.
They just care about themselves.
They
but
don't
anyway,
care
so
about pollution.
Rena, you're
just
telling
want
me
houses.
You don't have any picture on when this is coming.
It's supposed to be coming soon, but
though it's Christmas. Thank
you.
Christmas
would be great.
Thank you.
That was good, Jim. Okay, anybody else have another question before we move on to public comment? Terry, yes?
Yeah, I have an additional follow-up question. I'm looking at the housing element. Jeff, too, I think your question earlier, it looks like in the previous housing element, it looks like we broke out the affordable category all in a bucket. and then the moderate and above all in a bucket. And so I'm assuming then the 20 units was looked at over those 3 income categories, extremely low, very low, low, and then everything else got bucketed into the moderate, above moderate. Is that the same approach that would be applied for this going forward?
Yeah, yes, generally yes, but I do want to make one comment that we would also like to see through our analysis if we can fit the moderate income into that density category as well. But I don't know yet, but I'd like to see what we can do. Certainly not the above moderate.
I mean, I think it's advantageous for as a city if we're going to treat market rate as moderate. That's makes it easier. If we're allowed to do that. I mean, I guess my question is a matter of law. Are we allowed to just say market rate is moderate and be done? Because if that's the case, then I would consider moderate and above moderate to be one category, and there's nothing.
Which
looks
like that's what we did in the fifth cycle at least.
So I guess my question is that still a viable or valid methodology?
We'll need to look at that. I don't think we have that answer. I saw the table that Terry's referring to when I was looking at mine. It's on page 66 of your prior housing element, if you'd like to look it up yourself. What I don't know is exactly how that is going to play out given the way that the numbers were flowed across the income categories this time versus last time, because ABAG made such a specific change relative to the equity adjustment, or what they refer to as the equity adjustment. I don't want to assume that we can do the same thing that we did last time, because there may be something buried in what we have that I haven't seen yet. And so I'd hesitate to answer that immediately without being able to look at it. But Dana.
Okay, so that's fine. Maybe we could take it as a future item, but kind of a table it and come back later. But I do think it's important for us all as a group to understand the requirements and the math associated with the income bands so that we can hit those requirements and be in compliance. Like, I just don't think that's very clear at this point.
Sure.
Well, one thing I was just going to add to the discussion, I hope I'm not muddying waters, but in order to define an income unit as moderate level, or excuse me, in order to define a unit as moderate income, it's based on the price of the unit relative to the income of the family or the occupants who are living there. So we can't simply say that moderate is market unless you can show the math that market is affordable to a family of 4 making $90,000 a year, or whatever the number is. I don't know.
It's all pegged to median income.
So what happens when you zone it at a point? Let's say we have all the space we want and we zone it at a point in time, we submit it. That's all, based on all these densities and whatever. And then some significant event happens and the price of real estate and the price of housing or the price of consumer goods goes crazy. And now we've zoned it and we've qualified our housing plan or housing element to satisfy all of these, but circumstances have changed so that the new person that's going to be using that one and think, do we just get a pass on that? If the day after we submit our plan, housing goes crazy and now it's like 300% higher, what do you do?
So units that are affordable, that are defined or restricted as affordable, have to stay that way by restriction for a certain number of years, generally 45 or 55 years. So if, for example, you have a unit that is deed restricted as moderate or low income, it's got something recorded against that property so that 300% increase in house prices that every other unit in the market is experiencing, that unit doesn't experience that. That unit gets an incremental increase according to the income level, again, of the household.
But I think you're advancing the clock in a way, like at the time of zoning to meet, let's say, the moderate income category, there's no deed restriction because no one's
I'm
there.
sorry.
Right.
I misunderstood your question. You're
Yeah.
talking about zoning. You're not talking about the
Yeah,
physical unit.
I don't care about the actual units. I'm just talking about the zoning at this point because that's where we're at, right? So if we're just restricting our thing to zoning, you zone it at a certain income level, and that's based on the math that you just said. You know, the expected number of occupants of the house, and you know whatever on all that based on what they can afford on what it says 80 to 20% of AMI. But then after you've submitted your zoning, the prices have skyrocketed.
Well,
What do you do?
we're gonna get certified by HCD on this, and once certified, I can't imagine that during the 8-year cycles, in bad faith, they would come back to us, us having zoned in good faith that things were not going to go insane, and a hypothetical wild card is not going to jump out of the hat. They're not going to come back to us during the 8-year cycle and say, well, yeah, we certified you, but now we're going to decertify you and take over your local control because something completely unexpected happened. I think that's a hypothetical situation that's not really worth the oxygen that we're spending on it at the moment.
Well, I mean,
versus the probability of it actually happening.
I guess what the part that I think is useful is we need to do math to determine what zoning satisfies the income band in the center, but we don't know what that is. So like I want to know what the methodology is, and once we submit it,
I agree with that.
How do we? You have no control over what actually that unit goes for. If it ever gets built, then what it actually goes for. Those are essentially out of our hands. So
it sounds like a complex topic that we definitely need to flesh out. I don't think that any answers are necessarily sitting. I mean, you asked some excellent questions of Laura and them, and it sounds like that there have been past practices that have been used relative to the density and saying, well, this density reflects low income, very low income. But what I heard from Laura and to them is that maybe they'd like to go back and look a little bit at those things relative to there's some specific focus in this round of the cycle about equity and perhaps it would be good to do a little bit of digging before falling back on those old assumptions. They may be valid, but it doesn't sound like in the course of this meeting we're going to know a different outcome before the end.
Laura and Ellie, I suspect that when you get to the point where you've done the analysis and put forward a recommendation, how we came about to those numbers and the methodology used will be shared with us in probably great detail and significant discussions, right?
And it has to be in the element. We have to show our work to HCD.
Okay.
How did we get there?
All right. So it sounds like we'll have an opportunity to address those questions. I did want to follow up on the question about ADUs earlier. I do recall from our previous housing element preparation, there was I didn't live here at the time, but I've gone back and I've read the meeting notes, and there was a comment by our city manager at the time that in the past we had been able to use ADUs as part of our methodology and coming to our numbers, but we were not allowed to in the previous housing element. Should there be an expectation that will continue forward in this one? That's the whatever, I guess hearing Laura, the way that you've described, if there's a past history of building and methodology, and what I heard Rena say with our past of only being a couple, should it be an expectation that we'll be able to use that methodology significantly to address some of our lower income, our affordable income needs?
So let me add one thing, and I'm stealing Dana's thunder a little bit, but she and I talked about this yesterday, and that is you know, to the extent that we can potentially consider making changes in the city to encourage ADU use or development, like, for example, developing pre-approved housing plans or, you know, structure plans for ADUs, which can streamline and reduce the costs and do some other things. That's the kind of action that ABAG/HCD, that HCD might view as a reasonable rationale to go beyond the 2 units a year that we've had for the last 3 years. So we need to walk through what all of those strategies are to answer your question about, are we going to be at 2 units a year times 8, or whether we could maybe be at 5, you know, whatever that's going to be, plus units. And I think one of the many reasons I am grateful that Dana is on board is that she has a deep understanding of the housing issues as well. And so she will be able to work with Mig to flesh out all of those kinds of, I would say, creative accessory, no pun intended, types of policies that we may be able to use to be more effective in meeting our numbers.
Okay, and then and one last clarification, as I'm looking through the previous housing element here, I'm reminded that not only did we come up with a plan for the different income categories and et cetera, we also supplemented that with implementation policies and goals. So that I suspect that'll be a part of the overall package of the housing element going forward as well, right? Okay, so then that'll give us kind of that strategic framework with a little bit of coloring in the pieces. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Nice nails. Yes.
Can I add one thing about the ADUs?
Sure.
So at the HCD site, there's information on this, and it says, I mean, this is what I had read in the past, and I think there was another more detailed memo that they had released, but you know, what they had said was to rely on ADUs or JADUs as part of overall adequate site strategy to accommodate a portion of RENA. The element must include the estimated potential number of these units to be developed on analysis, and it has 6 factors listed, and has a number of a lot of words that talk about, you know, the community needs and trends and how you publicize it and what the requirements are. But it clearly states that ADUs can be a portion of your RENA number, but the amount of that number, I think, isn't clearly delineated, except that it says like a history. And I think the history is, it says by community, not necessarily by city. So it seems to be there's a regional component as well. But I think this would be good information to flesh out so that we can get a hard number. And I would imagine that, you know, a lot of these questions are simply, I mean, they're just a matter of law, right? Like how you use ADUs as part of your RENA is a matter of the law. How you calculate the moderate income is a matter of law. So I would think, you know, I'd ask that, you know, Meg as the consultant that we've engaged to help us navigate these laws, I'd look to your expertise, and I would hope that, you know, the next time we talk that we would have all of these answers, because it seems like these should be available to us.
Justin?
Yes, hi. I have a quick question about ADUs. Is there any change in definition of an ADU with the recent passage of SB 9? Would it just be a zoning thing that it will change from an ADU to just a duplex or subdivision?
That's a great question that I think that needs to be continued, that it's going to be explored because let me state this in one way. There is the possibility that somebody could take a single family lot, split it, and put a primary unit on each one and an ADU on each one, as well as perhaps even a junior ADU in the primary unit. So what was 2 could become 6. The whole question is, what's an ADU and what's a second new home on a lot? These are things that all need to be explored, and I don't think the law was clearly thought out as to what that means in relationship to ADUs. But I've talked to my colleagues about it, and our thinking is that somebody that wants to put another unit on lots not going to do both. You have your choice of doing, a duplex or a house in an ADU, but really, what more is it than just 2 separate dwelling units on a lot when you break it all down?
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, so we'll come back to the council after public comment. So let's, first of all, it looks like we've had good participation here. So we'll open up the public comment on this. And Janet, who do we have in the queue?
Mayor Wolf, the first person is Kathy. Kathy, as I promote you to panelist, if you can please unmute your microphone, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. All right, it looks like I'm having an issue again this week promoting the panelists. So Kathy, I'm going to allow you to speak as an attendee. You will have 3 minutes.
She's muted.
Kathy, if you can please unmute your microphone.
Kathy?
She's muted.
It's also possible she stepped away. Her hand has been up since we were doing the presentation earlier, and it's been quite a while. So maybe go to the next person in line and see if she lowers her hand and raises it back up. Maybe she just stepped away.
Okay, we'll go to the next person.
The next person is Joshi. Joshi, as I allow you to speak, if you can please unmute your microphone, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you for taking my question, and thank you for the detailed presentation. I appreciate the chance to ask a question. It's a simple question. So if the median income at the state level, it seems to be the guideline for determining the required distribution of housing units by income, then what's the rubric for determining fairness when it comes to addressing like past and current racial inequities? Like, is it just we're aiming for a racial distribution that reflects the statewide population, or is it something more subtle than that? Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Janet, do we have Kathy back, or do we have a next person in line?
I will go ahead and try Kathy again. Kathy, if you can please unmute your microphone, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
She was unmuted, but now she's muted again.
All right, do we have another person in line, Janet?
Mayor Wolf, I don't have any other hands raised on this item at this time.
Okay.
Oh, I have one hand that just went up. Our next speaker is Kathy. Let's try you one more time here.
Yep, she just muted again.
Who did you say, whose hand went up, Janet?
Our next speaker is Gary. Gary, as I allow you to speak, you will have 3 minutes. If you can please unmute your microphone.
We'll keep trying to get in touch with Kathy too.
Okay, am I on?
You're on.
Thank you, council and commissioners, for allowing the public to participate in this meeting tonight. And Laura, and your associate there, I forgot her name. Is that Ellie?
Ellie, you're
Thank
correct.
you for the presentation. That was very informative. I have a couple questions. I think Justin had brought up a question that I had is what really is an ADU and where do we find these guidelines such as setbacks, height limitations, those types of things are very important. I know when I've looked at ADUs before, ADUs normally cannot be sold separately from the primary residence. So is that something that as a person that may consider something like this, we can find out that information? Because it's kind of vague on what the requirements are. I know the city prior had some setbacks like 20 feet from the curb and 5 feet from the side lot lines, that type of thing. But can these things be 800 square feet or can they be 500 square feet? Because there's a lot of advertising going on right now for modular type units. So that's kind of my first question. I wanted to see if that could get answered. The other thing that I keep hearing the council and the individuals tonight speak about is we talk about building these types of units because of the SB 9 and 10. I realize the city has some properties that can be developed, but I think we got to turn this 180 degrees. Who's going to buy that property? The city's not going to build that property. The city has no money. I mean, back when we had redevelopment monies, we could probably do things like that. So we sell these properties. Who's going to build it? They don't pencil out a lot of times in California. Property costs are very expensive. And I'm not sure that we could even fulfill those 570 units, even if we had people that wanted to build them. I mean, let's just look at a standard ADU. Let's take one that's 800 square feet. Building cost for that is going to be $400 to $500 a square foot. Do the math, you're looking at over $300,000 to build a unit. It's definitely not going to be income producing for you because you're going to be upside down on it by the time you debt service it. By the time you get the thing reassessed with the supplemental tax bill, it just doesn't pencil out. So I'm hoping the council and the commissioners, along with the geniuses that we have in Sacramento, look at this as they don't own these properties. They're not business people. And if it doesn't pencil out, no one's going to build this stuff for people to move into. The other thing that concerned me all along when I heard about these programs as they were developing is that no one's really looked at the infrastructure, the sewer, the water, the construction cost, the utilities. Here we are in California, we don't have any water, but let's just build a bunch more units. Here we are in California, we have brownouts all the time where they turn our power off. This is 2021 and we still don't have those problems solved. So I think because the strain that it's going to place on the infrastructure, what are we doing to look at that? Because I can tell you now that I think there was a development out in Dougherty Valley, out in the Danville San Ramon area. I think it was the water district just said, hey, we're not going to provide water to that project. We just don't have the services going out that particular way. So those are questions I think we need to have asked, but we can say we're going to do 570, but let's remember, we don't own the property to do 570 units. If you're talking about ADUs, that's private property. That's homes like mine. That's homes like Jim's. That's homes like Mayor Wolf's. And if it doesn't pencil out, why would you build it? Number one. And then what are you going to do for access? You're going to build it in the back of your house and have someone walk around your house to get into their home? I mean, there's all these issues that I think that we need to really take a look at, aside from the details that Laura and Ellie are bringing up. I think we need to look at it from a different perspective. Let's go ahead and get all this stuff done and on the map. But no one's going to build it. We already saw what happened with the project there across from Stranahan. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't pencil out. There's the labor costs are there. The material costs are sky high. So how do we do this if we're going to go through all this exercise and spend all this money? So that's kind of my concerns. I'm hoping some of those questions could be answered. And I'd like to thank each of you again tonight for letting me speak. Thank you.
Thanks for participating. Hope you'll stay involved in the process. Did we ever get Kathy back, Janet?
Kathy is still showing on here. So Kathy, I'm going to try to have you speak again as an attendee. If you can please unmute your microphone.
Let's see, we do have one more, right?
We do have another speaker after Kathy.
Well, let's try that, and then we'll give Kathy one last shot at it if she's the last, first and last hand.
Okay, and there's another hand that went up after Scott. So Scott, I'm going to unmute you. If you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Hey guys, can you hear me okay?
We can.
All right. Just wanted to thank Gary for his insights. He's got a lot of valid points. As a libertarian myself, I really respect the ability of us to do with what we want with our yards, with our homes, whatnot. And he brings up a good point. We really should be able to do with that what we want. And I just wish that we would approach this from a libertarian angle instead of the angle from which we are approaching. But anyway, Jeff, I thank you for your viewpoints. Frank, I know you're not here tonight, but I thank you for your anticipated viewpoints. But yeah, it's a libertarian issue, and I wish you all the best. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Scott. Sorry, my video blipped out there. You said there was another person, Janet, and then we'll try to get Kathy back.
That is correct. Vince, as I allow you to speak, if you can please unmute your microphone, you'll have 3 minutes.
Absolutely. Can everybody hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Oh, well, it's good to be back, everybody, and see all your wonderful faces. Vince Moita, pleasure to see you again. Yeah, I just wanted to speak out on this. I mean, so today, front page of the Wall Street Journal, the Case Shilder Index, there was an article on it saying that year over year, the Case Shilder Index, which is the national index that looks at housing on an average, it said that year over year, the index increased by 19%. To put that in context, since 1987, when it was really created, that's been the highest increase since the crazy inflation of the late 1980s, that the index has inflated. And in California, it's only been worse. Housing is the biggest issue that California faces. That's why people are leaving to Arizona, they're leaving to Portland, they're leaving to other places because it is not affordable. This is why in 2019, the California governor, Gavin Newsom, signed into law the Housing Crisis Act 2019. And most recently, he has stepped it up to fortify this via SB 8, SB 9, and SB 10. Now, looking inclusively at what land is developable inside of the city is certainly one route to go, but it is more expensive. Infill development is considerably more expensive than greenfield development. And the city has long had plans to build out its sphere of influence. It's long had its plan through the Marsh Creek Road specific plan. And I'm here again to once again remind the city of the potential that it has to build out the Marsh Creek Road specific plan to help address these issues. Now, there is land available, there is planning available to look to for guidance, and there's opportunity to annex in additional land to increase the affordability for at least the city of Clayton and somewhat accomplish tackling these issues of supply constraints and housing constraints within the city. Now, if there's an opportunity to work with the city and try to expand on the potential developable amount there, we're certainly open to continuing to do it. And we hope the city will continue to look at all of its options because we are in a crisis. The state is stepping in and taking away the ability for local cities to even be able to make these decisions because there's such gridlock. There's NIMBYism, there's different issues, and it's unfair, the pressures that are put on the city council and the planning commission, which is why these cities or the state government has really stepped in and said, we need to fix this. And we have a crisis on our hands. And our position is, look, we have a solution that can help address this. And we're willing to work with the city to explore all options and put it all on the table and see what we can do to help. So we're here. We look forward to reaching out and working with the city to annex in and hopefully build out the Marsh Creek Road specific plan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Vince. Janet, do we have anyone other than Kathy's hand up?
We do not. So we could try again with Kathy.
Give her one last try here. And
Otherwise, she can call my direct line in the office and I can put her on speaker.
Okay, what's that number?
The number is 925-673-7304.
Okay. So give her.
While we're waiting for that,
She came through.
She came through. Where?
It looks like she disappeared there on my screen.
No, she's there.
You got it? What are we going to say, Jeff?
All right. So anyways, Gary's comment about ADUs, it's the state has changed a lot of laws. And I think if you refer back to the city meeting agenda on April 2nd of 2019, there's a lot of information about the state law regarding ADUs, what is allowed and what is not allowed. Basically all the questions, Gary, that you had asked about setbacks and definitions and all that, that was included in the agenda packet on the April 2nd, 2019 meeting. Granted, there may have been laws since that time that have changed, but I think you get the broad strokes of what questions you had at that meeting. So that was your question. And I think, to your comment about what was buildable or not, whether pencils, I think that's one of the things I was referring to back when I mentioned guiding principles, like, do we even care if something is buildable, or do we care about complying with the law? Like, those are two separate things to me. We can care about both if we want to, but we don't have to. If people want to build on a hill that's going to slide, I don't know. That's a different question, right? But I think, at a minimum, our focus is compliance. And to achieve compliance, zoning is the only thing that we need to do.
Right.
We don't need to consider buildability in any way, as far as I'm concerned, but that's a policy question. So that's why I want to make sure that we set those guidelines on those guiding principles on what we actually are trying to accomplish, because I think that will shape the choices that we make.
So Janet, did we get Kathy back, or?
Mayor Wolf, Kathy called and she did not raise her hand. So somehow the raise hand feature was selected on her name, but she actually did not want to speak on this item. Okay.
Well, Kathy, if you do want to speak, we're going to have more of these. So get some questions. You're ready to go.
Sorry to interrupt again. I do have a hand that was just raised from Jim.
Okay.
So Jim, I will permit you to allow you to speak, and you will have 3 minutes.
Now, wait a minute. It sounds like we're giving 6 minutes to the Moita family here. Hold on.
Yeah, exactly.
The father is not the son.
That's right. You know that. Can you hear me?
Just barely.
I've tried
Speak up, Jim.
I'll yell. Okay. So housing takes a long time to get approved. I started here in '88. Was turned down in '90 by the county. Told to work with the city of Clayton when your mayor was Roy Hawes. And then we worked together on the Marsh Creek Road specific plan from '90 to '95, approved then. And then the county passed their urban limit line, which was patterned after the Oregon growth boundary in Portland. The difference between the urban limit line in Contra Costa County and the one that it was patterned after originally was that one around Portland in that area has, I think, moved 2 or 3 dozen times. The Contra Costa County urban limit line has not moved once in literally 26 years. The growth we've seen in the Bay Area because of Silicon Valley has made all the transportation systems completely operate at a level of F at every intersection. And I don't need to tell any of you that if you drive back and forth on Highway 4, 580, 680, 80, 101, there is an eastern migration every evening, and there's a western migration every morning. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of cars and pollution. I read some things that say that we actually have the highest per capita gas consumption in the United States, second only to Los Angeles. And I'm not saying that's any of your responsibility, but I do realize that a lot of the open space that we have that has been static is part of the problem. And it's just a numbers thing. If you leave my house and drive to San Francisco at 5 o'clock in the morning, which I did earlier last week, I actually took my wife to the airport. We left at 5:32 last Thursday, and I got to San Francisco airport in 47 minutes. That's pretty good time. And so, but if you tried to do that at 7 o'clock in the morning, it would take you, I don't know how long. And the reason is we're 37 miles away in Clayton from our home, or 38. If you left, and many people leave from Sacramento, they leave from Stockton, they leave from the Central Valley, and they clog up all the freeways that are inadequate. So we need density, we need it closer to the job centers. We would like to work with the city. Our property was planned 26 years ago. The plan is old, it has to be updated, but we'd like to work with the city to see a way that we can plan our property to help you match your RENA numbers or best we can. I was born and raised in Hayward. I'm getting close, better stop. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. I think we all heard that. It was pretty faint, but I think we got it all. So thank you.
We'll have more meetings.
Do we have anyone else, Janet?
Mayor Wolf, I do not have any other hands raised on this item.
Okay, going once, going twice. All right, so we will
Still
close.
no hands.
Pardon me?
Still no hands.
Okay, then we're going to close the public comment
Okay.
and bring it back to the council for final clarifications, questions, remarks. Council and commissioners, sorry, we did not include you in that. Do we have any questions, comments, clarifications, anything you need going forward? I see Ed's hand is up. He does that proper thing where he puts the hand in the corner deal. Okay.
I try to be polite, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
My sentence is one sentence. We need to move jobs, not infill housing. If we move the jobs where people live, then okay. But that's not what the point of the RENA cycle is. And that's not what we're going to do to comply. But just emphasizing the same thing that everyone else here is probably feeling. There we go. Done.
Anyone else? Terry?
Yeah, I have additional questions about about kind of how are we going to develop our goals, and how are we going to bring in the feedback from the community. So kind of where I'm going with that is, I think if I've understood this process correctly, and I welcome Laura, Ellie, you to correct me, but I think if I've understood the process in the past, we need to put together a compliant plan, but the HCD needs to see it as a realistic plan as well. That's correct? Okay. So then I guess the other question, as I look around, in California and in other states, where they are faced with some of the same challenges we are around higher density and things like that. I've seen some people use some creative strategies around aesthetics and things like that in order to help it blend better in a neighborhood. Are those the kind of things, those kind of concerns around aesthetics, those kind of concerns around how do we mitigate concerns around traffic, all of the things that, how do we mitigate things around how impacts to our housing prices? And so how does that feedback from the public, how do we kind of figure out what those are and turn those into goals and implementations? Or is that something that is separate outside of this process that those would be developed, if you're following what I'm asking? I mean, is the work from Laura and Ellie going to be just to put together a plan and say, here's where we would put them, and then anything else around how do we mitigate those impacts is an outside question or a separate question.
They're here to focus us through that process of discovering the answers for ourselves from the community.
Raina and Dana, if I could just touch on that real quickly. Ms. Denslow, the key thing that's going to be part of this is an environmental impact report. So for people who are concerned about the traffic and the physical impacts associated with 570 additional units, those things will have to be examined through the CEQA process. The question about aesthetics, how can these things blend into the neighborhoods? Those things can, absolutely be addressed by the guiding principles that Councilmember Wan has suggested be part of the housing element, as well as goals and policies and action items. So if there are things that are really critically important to the community that you want to see as part of this, it's just not creating the capacity for the units, but it's making sure that the units look, feel, blend into Clayton. That's absolutely something that could be addressed as well.
Okay, and that's feedback that we're trying to ascertain through the community engagement process as well. Not only the specific details about what locations, but also kind of how do we match what we're doing with our community values and what are our community values.
Right. Yeah, it's a question of trying to think of the right phrase. It's not no because, it's yes if. Well, yes, it's acceptable if we do the following.
Okay, I think that's all my questions right now.
Thank you.
To clarify, when I'm talking about guiding principles, it's not for the housing element itself, although I think we should have that as well, but it's for the process that we are engaging in to arrive at a compliant housing element. It's the overall thing that should provide governance and guide rails to how we engage with this process. That's what I think would be useful tool. I see on slide 12 that you have a rough timeline. Is there a more detailed project plan that you have that would kind of have a few more milestones and deliverables that we could reference when we are kind of like going through this process? TBDs are fine, I think, in a project plan at this stage, but like a plan itself would be helpful.
We have a draft milestone schedule that we've looked at internally as a project team, so we can revisit that with staff and confirm that it matches our current assumptions, and then get you a little more detail. Certainly.
Yeah, that would be useful. I'm used to a lot more detail on a project plan to see. It's easier to monitor and assess where we're at with that. So I think those are good tools.
I would concur. That's exactly what I was going to ask about as I'm looking at this, because at this point, I can see that there's pop-up events coming up. The online survey is going to go out and we have community workshops, but I don't see at what point we come back to the council for input and how we get to decide things. It would be nice to see what the cadence would be for when we're going to meet again and discuss it. So I know it's a draft and we don't have to put it out to the public if you don't want, but I would like to see that as well, especially as we get before winter when we're going to start drafting goals and policies. There's a lot of things to work out between now and winter, and that's literally around the corner, and not many meetings between now and then.
Yeah, I think in the mix of ingredients that we need, there's a lot that's missing. There's a lot here, which is good.
Yeah.
But then there's a lot of pieces that's like, I assume that things will happen, but I don't want to assume. I'd like to like be able to know what those things are going to be. And then
maybe a clarification on that is where's the delineation between the work, I guess, Ellie and Laura, that you guys will do with staff versus what will come to us, because maybe that'll help ease some of the concerns. And I don't know who wants to take that.
I mean, we're paying them, so our consultants should take that.
I think too, I mean, we need to figure out, what pieces of this are going to be staff essentially monitored and worked through, and what pieces are going to come back to the council and when. So that's the deliverables, the day-to-day oversight of the consultant and the work is, I think, thankfully not going to fall on the council, but will fall on staff. And so we need to identify when those touch points are that we're coming back and what's going to come back at those points.
Yeah, I mean, I think to add to that, Rena, I mean, I think everyone would feel comfortable, to know that, our consultants are not working in a vacuum, whether it be engaging directly with this group or engaging with staff, but that there's a collaborative dialogue, and that, and regular touch points, and these items are being worked. It's not, here's our first presentation, and then we hear nothing for, in a month or two. And when I say we, I mean the collective we. Sorry, Peter.
No, I'm especially curious and want to know the data about our public participation and our public outreach. You've got this fall 2021 list of things you want to do, but I really want to know what kind of value we're getting from that, what kind of participation we're getting to see if we're reaching those people who really need to be reached. And so somewhere between that and the next milestone, I need to know how well we're doing, so to feel that we're getting value for this. That's an important point for me as a city council member.
I mean, just to piggyback on that, I want to give you a preview that when you present the survey data, I'm going to ask for all of the detail and the crosstabs associated with it. So I would like to know at that level of detail the information that we are gathering, and I think it'd be informative for everyone as well. So as you gather it, keep that in mind, because we're going to ask for it.
I'm just stepping back to the last housing element cycle, and I didn't hear or know anything about it, and I was a resident. And I think that was the biggest complaint that was had relative to some of the developments in town is we didn't know.
More time.
And so the key is going to be that telling people as much as possible so they can't say I didn't know, because we did this type of outreach.
Yeah, it's critical. I see that Commissioner Gavidia has his hand up. We can't see him, but we can hear you maybe.
Thank you, sir. On the outreach, so I'll give you an example just from my corner of, there were at least 30 people I've spoken to, some who supported me during the election, some who didn't. Not one of them is here tonight. In terms of how much this city spends its efforts trying to communicate to its citizens what it's doing, as opposed to promoting concerts, promoting other things. Monetarily, I already know what the difference is in terms of how much we spend. The only issue that I care about at this point in time is that this city do the best possible job to inform all of its citizens. It's a very narrow set of people who participate. If I requested the names of everyone who's attended these meetings for the last year, it's the same names over and over again. Didn't appear that way when we were in person, but it may have been that way. I don't know. But the city needs to do a much better job, because the ones who are going to end up dealing with this in the end is going to be the elected officials. Citizens react when things happen that they don't know about and that they didn't want to happen. So that's all my concern is. In terms of, I've heard over and over again tonight too about the Wall Street Journal, about unaffordable housing and all these, that it's a crisis. How many people know anything about economics and why we are where we are? The largest reason we are where we are has to do with interest rates. What you can spend on a mortgage is a fixed number. You can find that out the next time you talk to a mortgage broker. But if I can borrow money at 2% or 3% like I can right now, it means I can borrow much more than if rates are 5 and 6%. Now, I'm not making any predictions. I'm not supposed to do that outside of my office. But for all the housing affordability issues that I hear people complaining about, it has far more to do with monetary policy. There's nowhere to build anymore. So we can build apartments, that's great. It's not going to change what's going on in California as long as we have all these employers who continue to bring people in and pay them very well. And you know what? The houses that are already owned, you can't kick the people who are in them out of them. So this is a difficult task that the city has been given, but that's politicians. They don't know anything about economics. And we voted for these guys, so we're stuck with this job. So I would just say that what we need to focus on the most is making sure that our citizens are informed that our politicians came up with these goals, and now we have to implement them. Thank you.
Thanks. Terry, did you want to say something too?
Yeah, I had a question for Commissioner Gavidia. I think part of what we're being asked to do tonight is to give Ellie and Laura feedback. And in regard to the community engagement plan, I think they've kind of listed out a number of ways in which they intend to engage the community, which some of those ways I think have been employed for this meeting. Are there other things that you can think of that would be good guidance for them in the engagement process that they haven't already listed out in terms of social media surveys and et cetera that they put in the agenda packet that might address those groups you're talking about that aren't engaging?
I'm going to decline to answer that at this moment.
Okay.
Well, we hired the consultants to figure it out. That's not my job.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Well, we want to thank you for your presentation tonight.
Wait, I have one thing. So like, I'm not clear on what is our immediate next step? Like, are you looking for something from us? Are you going to provide us with anything? What is the next stage gate that we will arrive at?
So if I could take a stab at that, and that is we have a meeting between staff and the consultants tomorrow at 3:30, and we are going to regroup on the feedback that we have gotten from the council and the commission this evening, as well as the public comment. And then we'll be able to come back to you with we'll take a look at the milestones information that Ellie mentioned, and we will give you a more detailed schedule from now through winter to respond to some of the issues that have been raised this evening, as well as lay out what exactly those next steps are. Because I think we'll make a few adjustments based on the input we've received this evening. So the next thing you'll hear is hearing from us. I know that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but I can't really answer the detail as to what exactly that's going to be until we have a chance to debrief on this tomorrow.
Sure, that seems totally reasonable to me. When is that going to be?
I don't know. I would say probably a week of that. I mean, we're gonna, look to talk through that tomorrow, and I don't necessarily want to commit myself, Dana, and the consultants without talking to them. So we understand the urgency. Trust me, we feel the urgency. And so it will come back as quickly as we can possibly get it back to you.
Okay. So, I mean, just, as a ballpark on expectation, it's weeks, not months.
Oh gosh, yes, it's weeks, not months. Because by months, we're like way beyond where
I'm just saying up until that point, we've given no indication of a timeline. So that's why I'm trying to get ballparks for what we should expect. So weeks, not months, at least 1 week from tomorrow, possibly more, but not that much more.
Correct.
So that to me is is a reasonable time frame.
Perfect.
And Rena, is that communication going to come back to the council, to this whole group, or what does that look like?
Don't know the answer to that, but
I'd
probably
like
to
to
this
see-
whole
I'd like to
group,
see this
but
come
in
back.
a non-Brown Act violating way. So just, don't expect to see everybody's name on it, but yes, it can come back to this entire group.
Good.
Mala smiled. See, I made her smile.
That's easy. You just got to say like Brown Act and point of order, and then she's happy. It's fine.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a quick question. So Raina, when you are discussing it with MIG and with staff, is it possible to include in there the questions that the MOIDA's raised in regards to extending the urban limit line, and if that's possible and what that entails, as well as annexing further out? Who's laughing?
I think Mr. Diaz,
Yeah, if you could, just so that if residents have a question regarding how that works or why it can't work, et cetera, we'll be armed with that data.
Yes, in fact, I had already texted Dana the question. Do you know the question about what happens with jurisdictional boundary changes? And so that's on our list.
Perfect. I know it's taken 26 plus years and it hasn't happened yet, but I'd still like to know what that entails. Thank you.
I mean, even I would say like, it'd be interesting to know what the potential, I mean, I think the MOIDA's proposed, an annexation as a way to satisfy some of the arena. I think that's the pitch that we heard, right? That's the elevator pitch that we heard. So it would be interesting to know like, what is the process and timeline associated with such an action, and if it's even within the realm of possibility to contribute to satisfying the RENA goals, because I know that the process for annexation is
difficult.
It's a process. I mean, you think ABAG doesn't care about anything. I mean, LAFCO, like literally, they laugh at you. It's in their name. So we'll see. So I'd be interested in knowing, is that even a reasonable possibility?
Anyone else? Okay. All right. So once again, thank you for your presentation. We look forward to having, we are going to have this group back together again, right, Raina?
Yes, we will.
I like having the commissioners with us too. So this is great. And I appreciate the public tuning in tonight. Get the word out, folks. Get the word out. More participation, the better from our citizens. So look forward to the next one. And there's no date on here. So I guess we are adjourned for tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.